The transfer portal in college football plays absolutely zero favorites. It's essentially the free market. So, with that being the case, how is your team going to get better? Maybe a better question to ask there is, what does your team need to do to get better? We have got an absolutely stacked show for you today. It's Wednesday, April 17th, 2024, the last one on the face of the planet. And this show right here, this is the hard count. So if you're new to the show, you're just finding us during this portal extravaganza, welcome. It's college football every single day of the year. No, not just when they're playing games in the fall. We're talking spring games. We're talking fall camp. We're talking transfer portal as we are right now. So if you love college football the way that we do, make sure you're subscribed. We're glad to have you all along for the ride. I just mentioned a second ago, the portal is continuing to churn, continuing to buzz. Not really the fireworks that you had expected from that previous portal cycle where it kind of went berserk in the winter and you see high-profile quarterback jumping in, high-profile wide receiver jumping in, like real game changers for you in August. This portal cycle, as we mentioned on yesterday's show, a lot more about what you're going to have on the roster in November. How do you build this thing wide? How do you build a strong foundation for your roster? This portal cycle will do a lot for that. So with that being said, we'll talk about the latest movement in the portal. Heck, we got something between a fit and a prediction segment for you when it comes to some of those top names that are in the portal. We're starting to gain more and more intel on some of these guys. Would really encourage you now, make sure you are following the On3 transfer portal account, the On3 main account, Steve Wiltfong, Pete Nakos, and Hayes Fawcett. Okay, so those are a lot of accounts I just mentioned for you, but I promise you they will keep you as much as in the know as possible when it comes to everything going on within this wild world that is the transfer portal. Now, speaking of the transfer portal, you had Shiloh Sanders, son of Deion Sanders, current safety at Colorado, put something on his Instagram story last night, essentially saying, hey, defensive transfers, if you want to come to Colorado, DM me. If you want to go and play offense here at Colorado, DM Shedeur Sanders, my brother who plays quarterback here. Also put in parentheses, this is not last chance you. What do you make of that? We'll talk about it a little bit later in the show. I've got my own thoughts. Also, Florida, they seem to kind of be like the punchline of this entire offseason for a lot of different folks holding the microphone. I don't see it. I'm sorry. I think there's a lot more room for optimism than maybe we're giving credit for when it comes to what's going on in Gainesville. But we're glad to have you a part of this, man. We can't waste too much more time. We're going to keep a steady eye here on the notifications on the On3 Twitter page. So if we're looking at that during the show and you're watching on YouTube, we're just trying to make sure we're staying on our toes here, staying on the P's and Q's, and being attentive to the workings of the portal. Let's jump right into it, man. What is the latest going on within the transfer portal since we spoke on yesterday's live show? Damian Martinez. He's going on tour. Now, if Damian Martinez sounds like a familiar name to you, and maybe you've heard him within your eardrums at like some just ridiculous hour of the morning, because my guy was putting on clinics over on the Pac-12 After Dark scene, okay? Ran for over 2,000 yards his first 2 years at Oregon State, double-digit touchdowns. He's a hot commodity. Pretty fair to say he's one of the best, if not the best player available right now in the transfer portal. I just mentioned he's going on tour. He's got 5 visits set for a 10-day span. So he's visiting Arizona, Mississippi State, Tennessee, Kentucky, and Miami between April 17th to April 27th. So there's a little bit of sense of urgency, it seems like, if you're Damian Martinez trying to get something done here. The most intriguing school of that list to me is Tennessee. We went up and saw them in Knoxville. They're loaded when it comes to that wide receiver room. They're trying to, I think, improve that offensive line. Would expect them to be in the market when it comes to that whole side of things, along with everybody else this transfer portal cycle. But they have Dylan Sampson at running back, who's a stud, and then behind him, they're trying to figure out what else they can add to make that room more formidable. If you're Damian Martinez, you go play in the SEC. You go share carries with someone who helps you stay, fresh for the most part, honestly. And let's be honest here, like the running back position, you are trying to not have as much wear and tear when you go and play in the NFL when it comes to the carries you get, so you can kind of share the load there. Tennessee's fascinating to me. Would be curious to see what they look like when it comes to the Damian Martinez sweepstakes. The early intel from Pete Nakos, who was on the show yesterday, is that Miami is trending in the right direction when it comes to landing his services. So we'll talk more about that a little bit later in the show. Texas A&M safety Jacoby Matthews entering the portal. It sounds like, per Steve Wiltfong, again, Steve Wiltfong, make sure you're following him, crushing all the coverage here for us here at On3, dropping falling balls left and right. He says it's sort of narrowed down for Jacoby Matthews between Florida State and Oregon. Now, it should be mentioned, Jacoby Matthews, a former 5-star recruit. He's going to be an instant impact guy wherever he ends up. Oregon, we're told, is the school to watch. Florida State, while they are obviously a tremendous track record when it comes to what they do in the transfer portal and taking transfers and allowing them to have a ton of success when they get to Tallahassee, that secondary room is a little bit more crowded. Oregon, it's also worth mentioning, is the current home of Jacoby Matthews' former teammate, Evan Stewart from A&M. So we'll see how that thing trends, but watch those two schools for him. That's a big fish out there right now. Again, one of the best available. Speaking of best available, the best wide receiver available is former Penn State wide receiver Keandre Lambert-Smith. We talked about how massive a loss that was for the Nittany Lions yesterday. Couple of schools in the mix for him right now per Pete Nakos. Auburn, A&M, Colorado, Georgia, USC, and West Virginia all trying to make a push. USC kind of got in that action, it sounds like, later last night. NIL is going to be a factor here, is what we're told. Auburn, to me, I think is the most intriguing option here, just in terms of how it could have a ripple effect on the college football season, because you got Cam Coleman, and I know he's a true freshman, but we saw that spring game. You don't have to be an NFL scout to know that that dude can play some football. Peyton Thorne, I think, will be a little bit improved from last season. If you add another receiving threat, another experienced, more polished receiving threat to that offense, and you're running a system where you're moving the ball on the ground with Jarquez Hunter, and then add another layer, another weapon to that passing attack to help Peyton Thorne, I think you could make for some good things. I'm just saying that would, I think, potentially shake up the SEC the most if Auburn ends up being as potent as they can be offensively. A&M also making a push here. Keep an eye on them. Connor Wegman, you have to imagine it's attractive to go play with a quarterback of his caliber. West Virginia, it sounds like feels pretty good about the position they're in. Keandre Lambert-Smith is from Norfolk, Virginia. That's like a 6-hour drive to Morgantown. So it's a road trip still, but you're relatively close to home. Keep an eye on the Mountaineers. And Keandre Lambert-Smith. I'm curious to see how quickly that gets done, how quickly he decides on a school, because all those schools are in the mix. Colorado cornerback Cormani McClain, we kind of heard rumblings around this right around early in the spring, announces he is planning to hit the transfer portal per Hayes Fawcett. He was an industry 5-star corner coming out of high school. On3 had him as a 4-star. I'm curious to see what the market is for a Cormani McClain. Because on one hand, he's not that far removed from being one of the most highly rated corners across the industry per other services. And Miami, from what I have been told, will not be in the Cormani McClain sweepstakes. It's important to remember Cormani McClain, before flipping his commitment to Colorado, originally committed to Miami. Again, Miami will not be in the mix for Cormani McClain. I'm curious to see if maybe he ends up at a school like a UCF. It's not the SEC, it's not the Big Ten, but still, like, stay in the state of Florida, go play for a roster that's kind of trending upwards, if you ask me, and be able to stay in your home state. So curious, again, to see if the market ends up trending for him where he does end up getting some SEC interest, or if one of those other high-profile schools take a swing at him. But I like the UCF fit for Cormani McClain if it were just me. No intel just yet there, but I do know Miami will not be in the mix. Arkansas offensive tackle Andrew Chamblee, 6'6", 304 pounds. He started 8 games last year, all SEC freshman for them. He can't transfer to an SEC school. I promise you, there's a lot of schools within the SEC that would love to get Andrew Chamblee on their roster, but he can't do it unless he were to transfer there and sit out a year. Don't think he has any interest in doing that. We talked about it yesterday with Pete, man. Portal Pete Nakos told us these positions on the offensive and defensive line will be very high demand. Also, not a ton of supply to go with that high demand. So anytime demand is way up here and supply is way down there, what does that mean? The price point is through the roof. I have to believe that. Curious to see the other schools that get in the mix for him. He's got some visits already set up. SMU's going to make a home visit. They might have already made one, actually. He's going to visit UCLA today and Kansas State April 20th. So those schools right now all vying for his services. He could have a multiple-year impact for you, which is important to know. Another thing that adds some intrigue to Andrew Chamblee, another thing that adds value to him. You don't just get him for 1 year. You get him next year and potentially the year after that, and then we'll see what goes on after that. Houston wide receiver Sam Brown, one of the top wide receivers in the portal. This is a name that doesn't get as much buzz because he's not transferring from an SEC or a Big Ten school. But Sam Brown's going to be one of the top wide receivers in the portal. 62 catches last year, over 800 yards, 3 touchdowns. He's 6'2", 195. He's got good speed. Like, this is a dude that I think a lot of folks that are in the Keandre Lambert sweepstakes right now will eventually, if they don't land Keandre Lambert-Smith, circle back and land someone like Sam Brown. I mean, I don't know exactly how he's perceived in relation to a Keandre Lambert-Smith, but have to believe that a lot of those schools that need wide receivers will take a very hard look at Sam Brown's tape. He's going to be high demand, and worth noting, he's already played some power conference football. Houston obviously was in the Big 12 last year, but West Virginia is where Sam Brown was previously before heading to Houston. One more guy to talk about here, Miami quarterback, Ja'Carri Brown. 6'4", 220 pounds, high-profile player out of high-profile player, out of high school in Valdosta, Georgia, Elite 11 finalist, had north of 20 offers. I'm very, very curious to see what his market looks like, and I say that for a lot of these guys, but specifically with Ja'Carri Brown, this is a guy who played at different points for Miami, never really was able to put it all the way together, whether it was an offensive thing, whether it was a fit thing, whether it was a him thing, for whatever reason, didn't work out. But you see the physical tools with what he had at the high school level and how he was projected. The big thing with him is wherever he goes, he doesn't have to play right away. Now, that might be a priority for Ja'Carri Brown. He might say, hey, I've been waiting around long enough. I'm trying to play today, Junior, and more power to him if that's the case. But if I'm Ja'Carri Brown, I'm not so sure I wouldn't go somewhere where I can wait, learn from a offensive-centric head coach, someone who's got a specialty working with quarterbacks, and then once it, formulates a little bit more, I wait my turn, I get my time, then I'm set up for success to have a good year or two and hopefully have a chance to do something good at the NFL level. He's got 3 years of eligibility remaining. Now, if he wants to use all 3 of those, who knows, but he's got 3 years if he wants it to make the most of his situation. So that's the latest from the portal. If something breaks during this show, you'll hear us cut out pretty quickly and talk about it. But regardless, the portal continues to churn, continues to buzz. It's a slow burn. It's not the fireworks. It's not the craziest transfer portal season of all time. It's going to be about depth. It's going to be about what you have on your roster that's going to help you in November. Not a lot of flash in August, but November is where we'll see this portal cycle, I believe, show the most muscle. All right. We'll keep on moving along here. The portal's so fun, man, because it's kind of like college football free agency. Like the NFL is free agency. The NBA has free agency in the summer, and that's a lot of fun. But like right now, you've got dudes that you know of, that you saw make plays on Saturday afternoons less than 12 months ago, and now they are looking for a new home. And a guy that might have toasted your team last year has a chance now to go and help your team this upcoming year. Small world, small portal. Big love for college football. Now, speaking of the transfer portal, Jesse Simonton has a really good article out on all3.com that he put out, I believe it maybe was 2 days ago prior to the transfer portal opening. Who needs what? His article is specifically talking about the top contenders in college football per the Vegas betting odds and kind of going down the list there of what those schools need. This is inspired by that, but I want to give a disclaimer here. We could probably say offensive or defensive line for every single school we're about to talk about here. I'm going to do my best not to do that. We're going to just try and talk about more so what I would like to see them address. So it may not be the most pressing need, but if I were the GM, if something horribly wrong happened and they threw me the keys to your roster, this is how I would put it together, and this would be the priorities I would go out and address. Let's start out on the 40 acres, man. The Texas Longhorns, Steve Sarkisian got the people going last year, man. Like, it was provocative last year in Austin with how Texas made a run last year, silenced a lot of doubters. Quinn Ewers throwing darts like it was an aerial show. Vibes were high in Texas. Vibes were very high on the 40 acres. The offense was elite. However, what I think gets overlooked about what made Texas so solid last year was what they had in the trenches, baby. T'Vondre Sweat had a sick chain that I think says no sweat, or maybe it says make them sweat. Either way, it's dope. He was like close to 400 pounds. He was a run stopper and a half. Byron Murphy, another All-American defensive tackle. Both those individuals, good for them. They're going to go get paid in the NFL. So with that being the case, those two individuals that helped contribute to a top 5 run defense last year where you allowed less than 3 yards a carry, they're gone. You got to replenish that. And to make matters worse, or to make matters more urgent, I should say, as you move into the SEC, everyone talks about big boy football. That's kind of the label, and you're saying, yeah, we can play that. We just beat Alabama last year by 10 at their crib. That's phenomenal, but you have to make sure that you replenish and have those big boys to make that move into the SEC, which is, of course, that big boy conference. I think Texas will be aggressive here. I think they're going to be attractive here when it comes to courting potential defensive tackles. But nonetheless, the offense is going to score points, but the defensive line is going to be the difference maker, going to be the end-all, be-all for them, I believe, when it comes to what they're going to do that first year in the SEC. Speaking of the SEC, Alabama. Crimson Tide, we talk about it a lot on this show. They are watching how the transfer portal did to them what it did to them that first cycle around. They're just, rubbing their hands together, waiting patiently, and now they're about to go into attack mode. They will be buyers. They will be shopping spree mode. I have to believe in Tuscaloosa. That secondary, I fully believe, will get addressed. They got some youth back there. They got some guys they feel good about, but still probably going to address that a little bit. Again, if it were me, I would like to see Alabama go out and add another pass catcher for Jalen Milroe. Because as good as Washington was last year at quarterback, they were especially dangerous because you had three different dudes you had to worry about hurting you any given time. And so if you're a defense, you can't just give attention to Rome Odunze. I mean, you can do it, but if you do, Jalen McMillan's going to get open. Jalen Polk's going to get open. Jack Westover's going to get open. And so for Alabama, they have some options. Jeremy Bernard looked like a stud in that A-Day. Kobe Prentice, you've heard great things about him all fall camp. I'd love to see them add one more wide receiver to help maximize this Kalen DeBoer offense and just truthfully help Jalen Milroe that much more with his progression within this scheme itself. So secondary, yes, probably the greater need. Wide receiver, though, I'd love to see them take a swing and add somebody in that department. Michigan. We've talked about Michigan for a while on this show, man. We kind of have a question mark at quarterback. And I think if you were to take inventory of what they have in that locker room, in that quarterback room in Ann Arbor, I think Alex Orji is right now, I'd have to believe, the betting favorite to win that job if they played a game tomorrow. I think Alex Orji is a good option. You hear people talk about his arm strength. You hear people talk about his ability running the football. We saw that at different times last year. He's a good option. With that being said, as much as the production is unproven in 2024 for Michigan, there's still some really key foundational pieces to this team. Defensively, we talk about it a lot. Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Will Johnston. Offensively, Colston Loveland is going to be preseason all everything for them out there in Ann Arbor. Donovan Edwards. There's a lot of pieces here to where I think if a great option becomes available, you owe it to yourself at Michigan to go out and make a pitch to bring that guy to Ann Arbor. The criteria I'm looking for, if I'm a Michigan fan, I want someone experienced. Because Alex Orji, man, he could be phenomenal for you. He could be the guy that takes you where you want to go. And I mean, there's a question mark as to what he's going to be long term. But again, he could be phenomenal. If you go out and grab someone in the portal, I think you're saying we want to go with something we know is going to be successful. We want to go with a known commodity. Probably also would lean a little bit more on the arm talent side of things. You're not questioning Alex Orji's ability to run the football. I think you are questioning what he does stretching the field. That's a very vague question mark because we haven't gotten to see a lot of them just yet. We'll get a chance to watch them in the spring game, but we might have a different tune on this time next week. But I would be surprised if the right guy jumps in the portal if Michigan doesn't make a push there to upgrade at quarterback. You got a chance to make some moves. Ole Miss. I mean, Lane Kiffin does what Lane Kiffin does in the portal, man. Like, he's got that moniker Portal King for a reason. Mike Norvell, I believe, shares that label with him. But if you're Ole Miss, they will be active even in the second portal window. It's how they get down in Oxford. More power to them. God bless them. Replace what you lost is, I think, the sentiment if you're Ole Miss. Because you had Quinshon Judkins walk out the door. And again, I don't think it was something that they were overwhelmingly shocked by when he did leave Ole Miss. But still, that's a 1,000-yard rusher in the SEC that you just lost. And that offense last year, as much as Jackson Daugherty likes to throw the ball around the yard, as much as Trey Harris is going to get a lot of buzz when it comes to the preview magazines, they still are a 56% of the time running the football team. They still want to pound the rock. They still want to make you say uncle on that line of scrimmage what they do offensively. So with that being the case, go out and get your running back. It's going to be a very interesting market. Doesn't sound like right now they're in the Damian Martinez sweepstakes. That could change by the time we get off the air. But Henry Parrish, transfer running back from Miami, was previously at Ole Miss. That's the guy I'm zeroing in on. I'd be very surprised if he doesn't end up going back to Oxford. Comfortable within that locker room, have to believe. And he can play now. He can play. I think that he's a guy that could be a instant impact contributor for you, and they would bring him in to do just that. He's not Quinshon Judkins, but he can more than get the job done for you if you're an Ole Miss fan. Last one to talk about here, Oregon. Similar to what I said at the top of this segment, you could say offensive or defensive line for every single one of these teams, and every single head coach, I have to believe, would say, yeah, we'll take another guy there. We'll take another big boy up front by nature of how this season is about to be with the expanded playoff. Oregon, Jesse Simonton talks about this in his article as well. They're not as experienced as they were a season ago within the middle of that defense. They got some good pass rushers now. Mateo Uiagalelei, Jordan Burch, they got some speed off the edge. I think what they want to do in the Big Ten is try and solidify the core of that defense a little bit more with this portal cycle. They'll be attractive to a lot of guys that want to go contend for a national championship. They'll be attractive to a lot of guys that want to help their draft stock, go into the Big Ten Conference and playing against some of the best talent in the country. The thing with the defensive line is just what I said at the top of this thing. You're never going to say no to adding another defensive tackle. Doesn't matter who you are. You could be the New England Patriots from the early 2000s, the Brady New England Patriots. You'd still say, yeah, we'll take another big boy up front. We'll take another guy to help stop the run for us. It's like butter. I've never once sat down at a restaurant and said, man, I wish I had less butter on this. You'll always take more butter. It's great. There's no way that's ever going to be a net negative. It's always a positive. You also want to armor the car as much as possible for the stretch this season is going to be. Because if Oregon wins the national championship, it might be a 17-game season. You don't play 17 games with a 100% healthy roster, much less a 100% healthy defensive line, which is arguably the most physically demanding position on the entire football field. Probably a conversation with them in the offensive line for that category. So expect them to be a player for the defensive tackles that become available when it comes to this portal cycle. They were in the Walter Nolan sweepstakes early on last cycle. Walter Nolan obviously went to Ole Miss. Bottom line, they're shopping. They're going to be on the move for some of those top big nasties in the middle. So to recap it for you, Texas and Oregon, both looking for defensive tackles. If you were asking me who they would go after, Alabama, I fully expect them to address some needs on defense. If it's me, I'd love to see them go get another wide receiver to add to that mix to help Jalen Milroe. Michigan, they don't have to get a quarterback, but if a great option becomes available, I think they'll go after him. And then Ole Miss, replace what you lost, man. Quinshon Judkins is gone. I think they'll go get Henry Parrish, and I think that's going to be the way that Ole Miss goes to try and replace a 1,000-yard rusher. That's still who they want to be offensively. As much as you see the highlights with them throwing the ball downfield, they still want to be a running the football kind of team. So that might not be the last segment we do of a who needs what category when it comes to the transfer portal, but regardless, curious to hear what y'all think of those, because I know we'll get some pushback. We put out a reel on the Instagram page yesterday kind of highlighting some of those, and we got some fair pushback there, and that's the beautiful part about this. So let's keep on rolling here now, checking the portal as we're on the air to make sure nothing crazy happens. Transfer portal on Twitter, we're checking it. Nothing. Okay, Miami will make an in-home visit tonight with Oregon State running back Damian Martinez in Dallas. That's per his agent. All right, so keep an eye on that. He's scheduled to visit Miami later this month, but they're making a home visit tonight per Pete Nakos. So Portal Pete now, we're on the air. This news just broke. I'm telling you, make sure you're following him on Twitter at Pete Nakos. He's crushing the portal coverage. I'm telling you, man, he's got the game in a squeeze. All right, so let's keep on rolling here. A lot of portal conversation to be had, and I want us to have a portal conversation of sorts right now about what Shiloh Sanders put on his Instagram story last night. If you don't know what I'm talking about, we'll talk about it right now. But really quickly, if you're watching live, welcome. Make sure you're subscribed. Heck, double check you're subscribed, because this is a college football year-round kind of show, year-round kind of channel. Appreciate you being dialed in. Also follow me on Twitter and Instagram at JD Piquel. Yes, does it make me feel good, of course, but even more importantly, that's where we can interact when we're not live on the air and having the live chat. So, appreciate you in advance for doing both of those things. Back to what I was saying. Shiloh Sanders, son of Deion Sanders, current safety at Colorado, posted on his Instagram story last night a logo of Colorado with the text underneath that says, "Defense transfers, DM me." The next line, he says, "Offense transfers, DM at Shedeur Sanders." Obviously, his brother who's playing quarterback for Colorado. Underneath that, in parentheses, he says, "This is not last chance you." So what do we make of this? I think to put a disclaimer on this thing, I want to make sure we get out ahead of this. I am not anti-Deion Sanders. I love what Deion Sanders has done with college football. I love how he communicates as a leader. I love what he's about. I want to make sure that's out there. I would also say that within this Instagram story, I tweeted it out as well, I would love to have some more context on this thing. Is it the thing where Shiloh Sanders is just taking matters into his own hands and saying, hey, if I want to go and acquire some talent, I'm going to use my social media platform, more power to you? Is this Deion Sanders saying, hey, Shiloh, put out a PSA on your Instagram, tag Shedeur, tell him to communicate with you? Is this like a freelance thing? Like, I don't know. I think context is crucial here, but going off of what we have here, which is not a lot of context, we're just going to kind of give our thoughts on it as follows. This is not a bad thing. Okay, this is not. Player-to-player recruiting is phenomenal. Player-to-player recruiting, personally, I would say, is the most effective way of recruiting that there is. Because player-to-player, man, like, nobody's trying to sell you anything. Nobody's talking about an NIL bag with you. Nobody's trying to sugarcoat anything. Like, I've gone on visits when I was a player and had guys tell me, like, hey, this isn't a great place. Don't come here. That happens. That absolutely happens. Players are going to give you the most honest version of what's going on within a program as possible, more than anybody else. They have no stake in the game, really. So I love this. Now, however, this, to me, struck a little bit of a funny chord, because I think when it comes to player-to-player recruiting, the way that happens typically is coach tells a player, hey, we want to go get running back X. Can you put in a good word? Or the player goes to the coach and says, hey, coach, who are we after right now? I want to help us recruit. That's why you hear so much about quarterbacks when they commit early being a centerpiece and helping add more players to their class because they're phenomenal recruiters. So with this whole thing, again, the context is crucial, but it doesn't seem to me like a thing where Deion Sanders said, Shiloh, hey, I want to go and add X, Y, and Z player. Put it out on your story. I don't think that's what happened. To me, this is just casting the widest net possible to try and add people, to try and add transfers, and try and get guys into Colorado, which, again, strikes a funny nerve with me. And the reason why it strikes a funny nerve is because I think in life, execution is everything, right? Like, the way that you go about your business, it doesn't matter so much what the intention is if the execution is poor. And to me, this came off as a little bit desperate. This came off a little bit as like not the way that you would go about doing this. I don't know if this is the most efficient way. And again, not a bad thing, but the execution to me seems like it's lacking here. Like, if I want to set up a meeting with one of my bosses, I don't tweet at them. I don't post to my Instagram story, hey, would love to meet, send, hope you saw that. No, I maybe have a face-to-face conversation. Maybe it's an email. Maybe it's a text. But, like, I'm not posting on my Instagram story. That's bad execution. And I understand recruiting players and set up a meeting with your boss are different things, but I think the sentiment reigns the same. Execution is crucial in today's day and age. The thing that this adds concern for me around Colorado is, like, the issue with me in Colorado over the course of, really since Deion Sanders has been there, is the concern that I have around the functionality of it all. And, like, is Deion Sanders in Colorado, are they going to lose more games because Shiloh Sanders says, hey, DM me and my brother if you want to play here? No, of course not. That's not going to directly impact them on the field. But it feels like another symptom of an operation that doesn't have the cleanest function and the most efficient way of doing things. Like, coaches should be on the road recruiting. Coaches should be the ones hitting the transfer portal, reaching out to these guys. Even more importantly, Deion Sanders, he should be the one reaching out to these guys. And credit Shiloh and Shedeur for wanting to do that. More power to them. But again, that's not the way this thing really should be working. It should be the players playing, the coaches scouring the portal, working the email, working the social media. Like, that's the way this thing should go. It should be a pursuit from the coaches to the players, not players saying, if you want to play here, DM me and we'll talk. Because at the end of the day, man, Shedeur and Shiloh, they're not the ones offering scholarships. And if they are, that's a whole other segment in itself, and we got another conversation to have. But going back to what I said, the dysfunction around Colorado is what's concerning to me, because we've seen a couple of things now just not past the smell test. Not past the smell test. Like, coaches leaving Colorado after being demoted to take a better job somewhere else doesn't pass the smell test to me. It's not bad in and of itself. Doesn't pass the smell test. Deion Sanders saying, I'm not doing home visits. I'm not doing it. And then listing off a bunch of reasons that, quite frankly, made zero sense to me about making other coaches jealous and how he can't do that because he's Coach Prime. No, you should do that especially because you're Coach Prime. You're the most charismatic person on the face of the planet. You go make a home visit with a kid, how's he going to say no to you? At the very least, you negate the chance for some negative recruiting to happen when a big-time coach walks in their living room and say, has Deion Sanders visited you? And they're in your top 3. I'm here. Like, again, functionality doesn't seem super on the ball to me there. Again, looking to recruit at the high school level, Colorado has not been as effective there. I understand the portal is kind of how they've operated for the most part here, trying to flip this roster. But again, this doesn't scream functionality to me. This doesn't scream great execution to me. Not a bad thing. I'm all for player-to-player recruiting. This doesn't define Colorado in their season in 2024, not at all. But I don't know if this is the most efficient or best look if you're Colorado. Like saying also in parentheses, this is not last chance you. I'm not a fan of it. Not a fan of it. Not what I would do, but more power to Shiloh Sanders and more power to Shedeur Sanders, more power to Colorado for utilizing their platform. It's not a bad thing, but again, the execution to me is everything, and this to me did not seem like the best form of execution, if we're just going to be honest there. But let me know what y'all think, man. Let me know what y'all think in the comment section. I mean, I get it. You can use social media to your advantage right now, and that's a good thing, but I'm just not a fan. Not a fan of it. All right, moving right along now. There's a lot of buzz right now, a lot of intel that we're getting from Pete Nakos, from Steve Wiltfong, from other sources across the college football landscape as to who's in the running for some of these guys. The intel is still so fresh and so early that we don't have a tremendous 100% gauge of this guy's going here, this guy's going there. That eventually will start to happen. But right now, these things can change at the drop of a dime. Kid might be going somewhere yesterday. He's going to go somewhere else today in terms of where we think he could go. But as of right now, I want to have a discussion together, and I went back and forth around calling this like transfer portal fits or transfer portal predictions. This is somewhere between the two of those, like where I think they fit and where I predict them to go. Probably there's going to be some disagreement there, but regardless, here are some of the top names that we're looking at right now, and I want us to just have a discussion together as to where they could end up going. Let's start with Jacoby Matthews. We talked about him earlier in this live show. I think Oregon is probably the best fit for him. That's where I'm going to predict him to go. Per Steve Wiltfong, it's narrowed down for him right now between Oregon and Florida State. That could change, but those are the two right now. What we said earlier in the show is true. The guy wants to play right now. The guy's a former 5-star safety. And not to say he couldn't have a ton of success at Florida State. In fact, Florida State's got a proven track record of if you transfer here, we're going to help you ball and help you improve your draft stock. That's great. But Oregon has a less crowded secondary room. And also, Evan Stewart already being at Oregon, I think, helps their chances of landing him. He's going to tell him how it is. He's going to be honest with him about the situation at Oregon, and I have to believe it's going to bode well for the Ducks. So I'll go ahead and predict, as of right now, Jacoby Matthews to be the best fit and to ultimately end up in Eugene with the Ducks. Here's a name that's flying under the radar a little bit. Dallin Hayden. Dallin Hayden, I thought when he was early on in his career at Ohio State, was set to have a lot of success in Columbus, had multiple games over 100 yards rushing when that running back room got a little bit dinged up. This is more of a fit than a prediction for me when it comes to Dallin Hayden. I think Colorado makes a lot of sense for him because right now, this running back market, it's crowded. Ole Miss, they're probably going to land somebody. I think it's going to be Henry Parrish. Miami is making a hard push for Damian Martinez right now. Per Pete Nakos, as of a couple of minutes ago, they're going to make a home visit tonight in his home. That's what a home visit is, obviously. I think you should go where you wanted and go where you can play right away. You've done the whole thing where you sit back in the depth chart and find a way to get on the field. Like, I think you should go somewhere where you can play right now. I think you can play right now at Colorado. And Colorado, let's be clear, they need help in that running back room. Not that they're bad by any stretch of the imagination, but you add someone in there of Dallin Hayden's caliber coming from Ohio State. Why not? It's a good fit for both parties. Now, I understand if there's some concern around what that offensive line is going to look like. That's fair. But at the very least, you'll have a quarterback that can take some pressure off of you in Shedeur Sanders. And I think Dallin Hayden has proven he is a good running back. To what level? I think he can play big boy football, but we'll see where he ends up. Colorado, again, to me, makes the most sense when it comes to a fit for him. There's other schools in the mix with him right now. Oklahoma State's reached out to him, I believe. I believe Auburn reached out to him as well. There's been communication. So bottom line here, a lot of schools in the mix. Colorado, go where you wanted, go where you can play, go where you can have the most impact right now. To me, that's Boulder for Dallin Hayden. Let's stay in the running back market. I just mentioned Damian Martinez. Before we got on the air, we put these lower thirds together. I'm predicting that he ends up at Miami. The most smoke around Miami, per Pete Nakos, is what we're hearing. They're losing Henry Parrish. go get the lion's share of the carries for a team that is trending upward, for a good offensive line situation. And I also, this is important to mention, I think Damian Martinez fits the brand of football they want to play in Coral Gables. Because Shannon Dawson, yes, he kind of has that air raid background, but you watch Miami play football, they want to pound the rock. Yes, they want to get out in space with the pass game. They want to get north and south in the run game. That's how Damian Martinez plays football. He plays behind his pads, over 2,000 yards in 2 years at Oregon State. I love the way that he runs the rock, and I think that fits exactly with what Mario Cristobal wants to establish right now at Miami. So I'm going to go ahead and predict he ends up playing with Cam Ward, which also helps you probably get a little bit of some better run looks with them being worried about them throwing the football downfield. Go ahead and pencil in Damian Martinez to Miami. That's my prediction. Last one here, and this is more prediction than fit, Keandre Lambert-Smith, someone we talked about already on this live show. I'm going to go ahead and predict he ends up at West Virginia. It's a road trip from where he's from in Norfolk, Virginia, right around 6.5 hours. That offense needs help in the pass game at West Virginia. This is the school that's garnered the most traction from what we're hearing right now with Keandre Lambert-Smith. That offense threw the ball 37% of the time in 2023. Now, some of that's offensive philosophy. Some of that's also like, hey, we don't have the ability to push the ball downfield. Adding a Keandre Lambert-Smith to that mix with his explosivity. He had 12 yards a catch last year. He's a proven commodity. He started 38 games for Penn State. Like, you know what you're getting with him. Immediately, your offense becomes more potent if you have the quarterback to get in the rock. I would also watch A&M. It sounds like they're making a push here right now. They play in the SEC, clearly, which is attractive to guys that want to help their draft stock. And also, I think you have a quarterback that you can really count on in a Connor Wegman. You're probably making a little bit of a educated gamble right there because you haven't seen him play the entirety of a season just yet. But what we have seen from him, you should feel good about if you're Keandre Lambert-Smith. Have someone that can get you the rock. A&M is one I would watch. But again, I'll stick with my prediction right now of West Virginia. Since we're talking about Keandre Lambert-Smith, though, I think if we're going to go best fit, like purely where would I copy and paste him and see him having the most success, I think it's USC. Now, USC, from what we can tell, is going to play the NIL game, so there should be a factor here. They're going to throw the football. Like Lincoln Riley's running the show, man, you're going to score points. I understand it's not Caleb Williams there anymore, but you're trusting the track record of who that guy has coached, whether it's Miller Moss or Jaden Maiava. Probably going to be Miller Moss, just if we're going to be making predictions right now. I'm confident whoever's playing quarterback for me. So the offense is going to put it in the air, score points, probably going to get a lot of targets. If you are Keandre Lambert-Smith, I like that fit for him a lot. That would be the best fit in my mind. A lot of schools after him. Predicting West Virginia, A&M it looks like is making a push, but I think there's some runway there. I'm curious to see what the timeline is for his decision there. So, Keandre Lambert-Smith to West Virginia, Damian Martinez to Miami, Dallin Hayden to Colorado, and Jacoby Matthews to Oregon are our predictions as we sit here today on April 17th, just before noon Eastern. All right. Hey, everyone who's tuned in right now, we appreciate y'all, man. Hey, good crowd. Good crowd today. Make sure you have subscribed to the On3 YouTube channel. Quick PSA there. If you're listening on podcast, rate, review, comment, all those things. We appreciate you. Also subscribe to the podcast feed. It just helps us tremendously as we move forward into the wild world that is the transfer portal spring period. Now, a lot of talk around spring football. We had some spring games last weekend, one of which was the Florida Gators out there in Gainesville, and you saw DJ Lagway throwing darts, had some special teams mishaps, which didn't get you super fired up, but I think you saw a lot of good things during that spring game. Now, spring, we've said it a million times on this show, it is for taking a temperature of what you have in-house. It is not for making a diagnosis, it's for gauging symptoms. And the symptoms we saw in that spring game, I think only support the thought that we've had around Florida, really since the season ended, that is, I don't think that things are quite as dire as the public narrative would lead you to believe. Now, we might be the last one out there on this branch having some optimism for Florida, but I think there is real reason for optimism in Gainesville. A couple of reasons for that. First and foremost, you have a quarterback in Graham Mertz. Graham Mertz caught a lot of punchline culture from the social media platforms when he transferred from Wisconsin to Florida. People were talking bad about Graham Mertz. People were talking bad about Florida. All Graham Mertz did last year from where I was sitting was play some really good football, some of the best football we've seen him play in his college career. He gets to have another year in that system under Billy Napier. being able to build off of what you did from last season to the next season with the same coach calling plays for you, that matters. That matters, and I think we're going to see him progress. Important to also mention, for Graham Mertz, you have a very real offensive weapon. When I say offensive weapon, I'm talking about you have a dude to where when it is 3rd and 3, you can feel very confident targeting him and getting him the football in Trey Wilson. He was a true freshman last year, burst onto the scene, going to be a true sophomore this year, blew up the spring game with over 100 yards receiving, had 11 targets. Like, they're going to get him the rock every which way possible. The reason why that matters is, especially in the SEC, you have to have answers offensively. And not just answers within a scheme like, hey, we like this play on 3rd and 2, we like this play on 2nd and 4. Like, you got to have answers in terms of when we play the big boys within our conference, we know that this dude on our roster is a winner for us. A winner in the sense of if we get a matchup we like, if we get him one-on-one, we like our guy more than we like their guy. 9 times out of 10, he's going to win that matchup. He's going to allow us to stay in this game. You saw that against Georgia last year. They fed Trey Wilson early on in that drive, and you saw tremendous success being able to build off of that, being able to keep that on your roster with a quarterback that's elevating in his 2nd year in the system. Those things are going to allow for Florida, I believe, to be very competitive offensively. Now, are there some things that have to happen to maximize that? Of course. I think you got to have, like we've talked about a couple of times on this show, you got to have another pitch to go to. You'd like to see Shamir DK step up, Montrell Johnson, Jaden Boff. They can be a 1-2 punch in that backfield along with some other guys. That would be nice, but I'm just saying there's some things to be excited about if you're a Florida fan offensively, some real reason for optimism. And we've said it a lot on here on the show, man, with Florida. That defense, I think, is improved. And it's very okay to be cautiously optimistic here. It's okay to say, I don't know if I want to trust just yet. We've said this a couple of times on this show, and y'all always blow up the comment section when we do it, so we'll say it again. There's a little bit of that Rod Wave syndrome with the folks out there in Gainesville defensively. Heart been broke so many times, man. I don't know what to believe. The heart is on ice for the good folks right now that are rocking that blue and orange gear and go to the swamp every Saturday. It's fair, but I think it's also fair to look at what was last year's unit and look at this year's unit and say, okay, night and day, we have more experience, we have better depth, we have probably a higher talent level. There's guys behind in that 2 deep that we feel good about, like Pup Howard, I think, is going to be a dude for you. Asa Turner's about to come down there and thump. He's a 6-year player coming over from Washington. Like, there are some real dudes on this roster defensively that are going to put you in a better position than you were last year. And we talked about it on yesterday's show when it comes to things that we do as college football fans that aren't probably good for our health, but we do them anyway. One of those things was piecing back together a schedule and the aftermath of it and kind of living in an alternate reality of, well, if this thing happened this way, then that changes the record for this game and that changes this thing. And then we kind of talk ourselves into a team that was, 4-8. They end up being 10-2 by the time we piece back together all the alternate realities. I don't think you have to make that much of a leap for Florida to say that they could have been 7-5 versus 5-7. It's a 2-play difference. It is what it is. But I think when it comes to what you expect from Florida, that's going to dictate your happiness in 2024. Because everyone's talking about Billy Napier and what he hasn't done and how he's on the clock and all that. Like, however you expect Florida's 2024 to go, that's going to dictate your happiness. If you're expecting Florida to play for an SEC championship in Atlanta, I think you're going to be a little bit disappointed. But you look at the schedule, man, it is an absolute Hunger Games for them that last month of the season. Let's pull it up right here. I got it on my computer, so I'll read it off for you here. When you talk about what they have in November, Florida, they're off the week before moving into November. They play Georgia and Jacksonville. They're at Texas. They play LSU in the Swamp, Ole Miss in the Swamp, at Florida State to finish the year. That's brutal. There's no way around it. That's absolutely brutal. When you look at what Florida could accomplish in 2024, I think you have to use the eye test and the context and have a nuanced conversation. Because if you're going to be black and white about this whole thing, and you say if Billy Napier goes 7-5, we're going to fire him, that's your choice. That's your decision. But I think if Billy Napier ends up going 7-5 and we got 4 one-score losses to 4 college football playoff teams, 4 top 10 teams, are we sure that it's best for everybody involved to part ways with that guy? A team that's telling you multiple times, hey, we're close, we're close, we're close. We're building something here. There's buy-in here. We're playing these top-tier teams in college football down to a score. Are we sure that we want to move on from that? Because I would also say, when you talk about context, let's talk about the roster that Billy Napier inherited. And I don't think he would ever tell you this straight up, but I have to believe that when he got there, he did not inherit a yacht of a program. He inherited a boat that had a lot of holes in it, that was taking on water, and that he had to patch up, quite frankly, both culturally and from a roster talent level, to even get it to be in a place where it could be competitive. And so last year was what it was. I think that was probably about what Vegas expected. Over-under win total was 5.5 wins. They went 5-7. It is what it is. But when we talk about what they're going to be in 2024, if you're expecting them to be competitive, I think they're going to be that. You expect them to look better and play in a bowl game, I think they're going to be that. How they look against the top teams in the SEC, I think, should dictate your assessment of Billy Napier and what he's done at Florida. Because if you dropped Florida into the ACC, I think you talk about them being a conference title contender. If you dropped Florida into the Big 12, I think you talk about them being a conference title contender. I don't think that they would be the odds-on favorite to win either of those conferences, but I think the way that we would view them is vastly different than how we would view them right now in the SEC. Now, nobody's complaining about being in the SEC. Heck, that's a blessing if you're the Gators to be in the premier conference. But with that being the case, the context around what Billy Napier inherited and what they did last year, what they have going into this year, everyone's just burying the Florida Gator football team and put them in their coffin already before we even played a game. I'm just sitting here saying, like, I see a lot of reason for optimism. I see a quarterback that can sling it. That's probably going to be better than he was last year. I see one of the best playmakers in the SEC, if not the country, in Trey Wilson. I see a defense that should be improved from a year ago. That was your Achilles heel. You got more oversight for Austin Armstrong as well with Ron Roberts. Like, there's so many layers to this thing where I'm looking at them like, they may not win the SEC, but gosh dang it, if they're not substantially improved, if they're not a 7-win football team, I'd be a little bit surprised, to be honest with you. Be a little bit surprised. So the way that it looks, the way that 7-5 looks, probably matters a good deal more than the actual record. But I think Florida will be competitive. I don't think that they're just a team you should just write off and pencil in as a win for your team when you go down the schedule preseason. I think Florida's got real reason for optimism from a roster standpoint, from a culture standpoint, from how they've been put together over the course of these 3 years. There's a lot to build on. Last thing I'll say when it comes to culture, we talked about it at previous different points when it comes to Florida, man. Like, there were multiple times where this team could have shown us we don't play for Billy Napier. We're out. And I'm not saying that you have just 100% buy-in across the board. That's rare for the most part in college football. But this team could have packed it in multiple times a season ago. They didn't. Played a lot of teams tough all the way through to the end of their schedule. You don't get credit for playing teams tough, but I do think you find out a lot about a team's culture when things aren't going exactly how you would like them to. And things didn't go Florida's way a lot of times last year. But with that being said, still seems to be some belief in that locker room around Billy Napier, and I think they will have a little bit of an edge to themselves when it comes to what they do in the fall. So with that being said, don't write off Florida, or do so at your own risk. Either way. All right, make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you've liked the video. We're glad to have y'all all dialed in here. If you're new to the show, one of the things that we do every single live show, time permitting, is we go to the live chat because we call ourselves the People's College Football Show, and that's great to put that on a t-shirt. That's great to put it on the headline and say that. It sounds real nice, but you can't call yourself that if you don't involve the people into the show. And so we're going to do that right now. Get your questions into the live chat to our guy Nick Brake running things right now. People's champ, producer extraordinaire, Nick Brake. What's going on, baby? How's the chat today? Is everybody happy? I know it's been some hostility the last couple of days. Okay, that's good. Wild times. Very wild times. Which way is the chat trending right now when it comes to that Colorado topic? Are they pro posted on your story, or are they like, hey, I don't like that way that whole thing shakes either? Like, what's the approval rating in the chat for that?
I'm on
Instagram
mute.
story?
I'm unmuted, guys. Sorry.
You're good.
I was on mute. My bad.
I love it. No, you're good.
Yeah. So I'm aware you guys can't hear me. Yeah. So we're talking about Colorado and Yeah, Sandman, 3 different chats. You are muted. Guys, I'm aware. I've been unmuted for like 45 seconds.
There we go. He's back. He's back.
Wow. Okay, well, we got a super chat, so let's just get to that.
Yeah, I love it.
Dakota says, do you think Tennessee will get a running back out of the portal? And who are they most likely to get, Oregon State or Ohio State's running back? What do you think, JD?
He said Oregon? Or he said Dakota? Or Dakota the name?
Oregon State. His name is Dakota.
Oregon State. Oh, okay, so for a second I was like, man, I love the Jackrabbits of South Dakota. I love North Dakota State, but I have no idea what they're going to do in the portal. Will Oregon State get a running back? You would imagine so. Who that ends up being, I'm curious to see what the rest of the market ends up looking like. So we'll keep an eye on that. But I would expect things to develop slowly if you're Oregon State when it comes to who they add at the running back position. That running back market is going to be one to watch. It's going to be good. It's going to be good.
JD, I'm getting claims that I'm still muted.
Hey, it's okay.
Let me put on my headphones.
So the folks are saying in the chat that Nick Brake is muted. And
I
we got
can hear
hashtag
myself.
mute Prime, hashtag mute Nick. So we got a lot going in the chat. I see a lot of people asking good questions. I see someone saying Florida is out. Again, I'd be slow to say that. I'd be slow to believe that they're just going to be done. I see someone say Notre Dame's floor for the 2024 season. I think 9-3 is a pretty solid floor for them. They got some tough games. They got A&M. Who else they play? They play Florida State. Like, it's not a cakewalk for Notre Dame by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think the overall roster talent level for them, they're going to be able to roll the ball out there and should be superior in 9 of those football games. Now, roster talent isn't how the game is played. It's a nice thing to hang your hat on in April, but it doesn't ultimately dictate wins and losses when it comes to the fall. But I think 9-3 is a pretty solid floor for Notre Dame. If the sky falls and something wild happens, 8-4, 9-3 feels fair to me.
JD, I was collectively being trolled by the chat because so for people who don't know, I listen with these massive headphones that I'm not going to wear while I'm on, so I can't hear myself. I can only see the levels, but I do look at the chat. So yeah, I was getting a little frazzled by you guys.
That's okay, dude.
Nick Hoff said,
that's okay, but hey, look at you. You're back.
I'm back.
You stood in there. You took it. I mean, like, that's just like a good quarterback standing in the pocket, baby. That's you.
Yeah, I'm back.
So back.
Look, OG Gary asked a question yesterday. I didn't get to it.
I'm
going to ask his today. Which exact positions do you think are needed for LSU and Utah? No surprise, it's LSU and Utah.
LSU and Utah, baby. If I'm Utah, let's go get Cam Rising some weapons. I'd love to see them add a running back with Sione Vaki gone to the NFL. For LSU, it's all defense. Like, we probably will talk about LSU in a future portal segment in terms of who they should add. They're in it for that Indiana defensive lineman right now at the time of us being live. I think I really think that the defensive line is where you start and then you build out from there. LSU's probably got a couple of needs defensively, but I would start on the defensive line, start in the middle, work our way out. And then if there's some other pieces on the board, let's go add a safety. Let's go add some other corners. Like, let's beef this secondary up as much as possible to where we don't have busted coverages like we saw in that spring game.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out to Sandman for saying he's just deaf, and that's why he couldn't hear me.
Shout out Sandman.
Riley says, what's worse, Dabo Swinney's approach to the portal or Nick's mute fiasco?
Why are they hating, dude?
Riley's good. He's always very
it's affectionate though. You know? Like they wouldn't chirp if they didn't care.
That's true.
Dude, the Dabo Swinney thing is worth talking about. I know he's just kind of throwing shade, but the Dabo Swinney thing is wild. And I was talking to somebody in the office about this yesterday. The portal is used to fix recruiting mistakes, right? Like, if you miss on somebody in the portal, if you miss on somebody at the high school level, hey, that wide receiver didn't pan out how we thought, that offensive tackle, that quarterback, whatever, pick a position, you can fix it by going to the portal and grabbing an upgrade. Well, Clemson hasn't gone to the portal, and they've suffered for the most part. Haven't gone to the portal. I know there's one-offs here and there, but Clemson hasn't gone to the portal, and we've seen them slowly decline. And so, yes, you say, hey, what's going on? We should go to the portal and try and help our roster. On the other side of things, I think it's just as fair if you're a Clemson fan to say what's going on at the high school level. How can we continue to miss on these certain positions and not look explosive offensively to where it hurts us in the fall? And the reason why I think Clemson at some point is going to have to go to the portal is because they are continually getting passed by teams that are leaning on the portal. Florida State, great example from last year. Miami beat them last year. They're going to go and add some more pieces, I expect, this time around in the portal, with Cam Ward already being the centerpiece of that. They're moving the needle. Louisville, they played for the ACC championship last year. They took double-digit transfers last year and this year. So I continue to look at the way this thing is shaping up, and I'm like, teams in the ACC are passing Clemson using the portal. At what point does Dabo say, hey, man, we want to protect our culture, but we got to make sure that we have the talent to field to be successful on Saturdays? And I would take it a step further because I'm all for protecting culture. That's one of the things I have admired and respected about Dabo and Clemson for as long as I can remember. But if your culture is strong, is it not able to sustain adding a couple key pieces? I'm not talking overhauling the roster and going and doing a 25 transfer portal overhaul kind of guy. Like I'm 25 guys from the portal to overhaul your roster. I'm not saying you do that. But if the culture truly is strong, then it can withstand adding 5 or 6 new guys. It can withstand adding some new faces to the jump. And also, you can still be meticulous in how you evaluate the character side of things and how that fits with your culture. You don't have to just throw that by the wayside. So that's a long soapbox to be on there, Nick. But I truly believe that Clemson can have their cake and eat it too. You can use the portal and be successful and help your roster and still sustain and preserve your culture.
Thank you, JD. Good point. Now, I was told I'm talking too loud because I was like, man, I'm muted. Craig is going to be our last question. How's that sound?
Love it, brother.
I haven't heard from Craig in a while. Welcome back to one of our Nebraska fans. It says, ask JD, what is your most under-the-radar team this coming year after all the coaches' changes, transfers, and whatnot here in college football? For me, it's Ole Miss. I feel like it's a good time for them to climb.
Ole Miss definitely on the climb. Hey, you crushed it, Nick. You're doing a lot of things. We're trying out some new tech, too, with those headphones. You made it happen.
Actually, a new soundboard. We've gotten a lot of problems with our old soundboard, so we transferred this week. It's on this side of me. I like it, though.
You're crushing it.
Stay focused because I've got a kickball game tonight.
You're grinding.
That's coming into my mind.
You're grinding.
So with that being said, JD, Craig's question, it's a good one. I'll let you answer it.
Let's go. Chat, you be good to Nick, man. This is the guy running the whole operation. Nick is the engine that makes this thing go. Nick, appreciate you, brother. Hey, good luck tonight. Good luck tonight in the kickball game.
Always.
To answer your question, Craig, Ole Miss, I could see them being that under-the-radar team. I think Ole Miss is going to be top 10 in the country to start the year. Depending on how under the radar you want to go, compare last year to this year for the buzz around Knoxville. Last year, it's Joe Milton and how good he's going to be, and I took part in that 110%. I took a few flyers on Tennessee and predicted them to have sustained success that they didn't have this past season, so it is what it is. Nico Iamaleava and what he could be for that team and how he can make that offense hum and the way they've improved on the defensive side of the football. If Nico Iamaleava hits the way that he can hit in terms of his physical tools and he acclimates to the game quickly, Tennessee's going to be a problem for everybody in the country. Now, if they make that 12-team playoff, we'll reset this discussion, but I'm just saying, man, did anybody want to play that 2022 Tennessee team in a 12-team tournament? I don't think so. And I don't know they're going to be as potent as that 2022 team, but I think they have every opportunity with how many weapons they have and how good they are at quarterback to make a real run. So, with that being said, we appreciate y'all tuning in, man. Well, I know that things are crazy right now. The transfer portal is popping. We are back on the air tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern. If you're more of a podcast person, subscribe to the podcast feed. Podfast feed too, because that's your fast. Regardless, we appreciate y'all, man. We're back tomorrow, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a minute. We love y'all. We appreciate y'all. We don't take a second of this for granted. We're going to keep this party rolling. See y'all.